Hi guys, this is Jomar, and in today's video, I will show you how to shoot using Aperture Priority Mode. So just a quick review. Remember that exposure is a combination of aperture, ISO, and shutter speed. Aperture controls the depth of field. ISO controls the sensitivity of the light. But for this video, let's just consider the ISO as the quality of the picture. It controls the quality of the picture. Lower ISO, the best quality. So for the shutter speed, it controls the motion. So a faster shutter speed freezes the motion, and slower shutter speed introduces motion. If you're still using full auto in your camera, you cannot control any of these settings because the camera controls everything for you. Let's say if you want to have a photo with a blurry background, you cannot do that on full auto because the camera may not set it like that for you. So it's either you choose manual mode or aperture priority mode. Those two allows you to control the depth of field or the aperture. Okay? The problem with using manual mode is this. Remember, when you frame a scene, the camera will give you an exposure setting for that scene, which means that if you point the camera to a different scene, those exposure settings may change also. And if you forgot to change those settings, you may get bad exposure. You can avoid that using aperture priority mode. So remember guys, we can control the depth of field using aperture. So we are in aperture priority mode. In this mode, we can select what aperture we want and what ISO we want. And the camera will automatically give us the correct shutter speed or the correct exposure. So that's it. Okay guys, so moving on, we'll walk around Bonifacio High Street to take some pictures using aperture priority mode. So come on. I set my aperture to 5.6 and my ISO to 100 so that we can get the best image quality. So the thing about this mode is that we just set those two things and just focus more on the events happening around us so we can capture them fast. Because we know that the camera will give us the correct exposure. So with this mode, we can also just focus on our composition without worrying about the exposure. So, okay. So let's change my aperture to f8 and let's take a picture of this. if you're using aperture priority mode, you still have to remember two things. So one is, you're still shooting in a semi-automatic mode, meaning that the camera still determines the correct exposure for you. You just get to set the aperture and ISO. So in some cases, you may still get underexposed photos, okay? Like for example, when you're shooting against the light, like this one. So the second one is, if we get to places with low light conditions, the camera may give us a slower shutter speed. So chances are we get blurry photos. So we still have to be mindful with our shutter speed. So to give you an example for the first one, let's find the subject against the light. So let's take a photo of this tree, for example. Just to give you an example, okay? So this tree is against the light. So the camera gave me an underexposed image. So to fix this, we need to add value to the exposure compensation. I mean, we need to increase our exposure compensation. For this example, I added 2 steps to the exposure compensation. So let's see what will be the next exposure. As you can see, the camera gave us proper exposure. So the tree is now properly exposed. Okay? So for the second one, let's find the place with shade. Let's find a shady place. Okay guys, so I'm going to take a picture of that place. So it's not very bright, and if I pick a smaller aperture, the camera will give me a slower shutter speed. So let's take f16 for example, with an ISO of 100. Let's see what will happen. So the camera gave me a slower shutter speed. The camera gave me 1/3 of a second. I can't hold the camera still with that shutter speed. So to fix that, we can open up the aperture to 5.6 and let's see. Now the camera gave me 1/25 of a second. So the picture is quite sharp because my lens have vibration reduction. So it kinds of compensate for the camera shake. Now we can also increase our ISO. So let's make the aperture to f16 and change the ISO to 3200. Okay. So with us increasing the ISO to 3200, the camera gave me a faster shutter speed, 1/68 of a second. So that's the second fix. You can increase your ISO. Okay guys, that concludes the video for Aperture Priority Mode. So next video will be all about shutter priority. So come back next time. Thank you.